What do you think this rock and I have in common? More than I care to admit. So, I've actually been told before, Ron, you have the self-awareness of a rock. Not a very flattering thing to hear, but I have to admit there's some truth in it. So, why am I trying to talk about self-awareness and emotional intelligence? Maybe because I've made some of the rookie mistakes over and over that you might be making as well. And I have a few things I can share. So I've been coaching managers and people in business for over 20 years, and I've learned a couple of things along the way, more about myself than about other people, to be honest. But let me share with you some of the things that have come up in the course of my work with a lot of different people in business in different countries and cultures. Self-awareness. I asked my 15-year-old son, what do you think self-awareness is? And I got a very interesting answer. He said, I think it's telling the truth to yourself. And my follow-up question then was, so do you tell the truth about yourself? And his next answer really took me back. He said, sometimes I do, and sometimes I don't. I immediately shot back and I said, that is self-awareness. And I think there's a lot of truth in that. Self-awareness, at the heart of it, is about telling the truth to yourself, about yourself. So let's take a little bit of time to unpack that. There's many different ways that we can look at self-awareness and look at the different facets of it. One of the first ways that I would describe self-awareness is it's being aware about what you're feeling, what your emotions are in the moment that you're actually experiencing them. And that's incredibly difficult. Just think about the last time that you were in a heated argument. What were you feeling and what brought those feelings up? Now, if you think about the other person or what was going on that riled you up, you're not very self-aware. Because as much as we would not like to admit it, a big part about our own anger and conflict starts within ourselves. And we have triggers. And it's not really about the other person at all. We would like to think it is. But self-awareness is being able to spot what triggers us and how we're responding in the moment, and when we have a choice, and when we've taken ourselves down a path where we're really kind of in the grip and we've been hijacked and we don't feel like we have any choice but to just erupt or just to withdraw or to do all sorts of things that undermine what we're really committed to. Self-awareness, it's being honest about what you're feeling. That's one of the first things that I would emphasize. It's also being able to describe your emotions and to label them accurately. Understanding your emotions, and not just what you're feeling, but why you're feeling that. Why there's these undercurrents, why your mood tends to run in certain patterns or along certain familiar ruts. Knowing your triggers. Are you able to predict your emotional reactions? All of these are parts of self-awareness. And the more that you can check these things off, you can say, yes, I know that. Yes, I'm aware of that. Yes, I know these things. You have a greater self-awareness, certainly more than that rock that I was showing you a minute ago. There's another big part of self-awareness. You could call it a sub-skill, and I call it self-assessment. How well can you assess or to take inventory about things like your strengths and your weaknesses, or your gaps, if you want to use another word? Do you know your strengths? Do you know your weaknesses? Really? Do you know what your values are? Do you know your behavior style? Do you know your thinking patterns? Do you know your driving forces? What motivates you? What gets you into action, or the things that you naturally avoid? All of these are very important areas for self-assessment or self-knowledge, knowing who you are intimately from the inside out. So it's one thing to be able to identify these things, another to be able to articulate and to put these into language and to use them. At the heart of it, we come back to this issue. Are you willing to be honest? And how well can you actually describe what you are strong at and what you're not so good at? That's the key part of self-assessment. Now, at this point, you may be asking yourself, so Ron, I'm starting to see that there's a lot more to this than I at first thought. How do I get better at this? How do I become more self-aware? And that's really the subject for another in-depth lesson. But let me give you a couple of pointers before we wrap this up. There's several things that you can do that would help you develop more self-awareness. One of those that's pretty simple is to keep a journal, is to start asking yourself these questions and to journal about it on a regular basis. What am I feeling? What are some better words to describe that? More accurate, go a little deeper, peel the onion back a few layers. So keep a journal. After you've had a particularly difficult encounter with someone, analyze it and take a look at what was your part in that, rather than trying to put most of the blame over on the other person and how they got you so upset or how they were so incompetent or whatever is your typical way of casting blame on the other party. Take a look at what your part in this was. Keep a journal. That's the first thing. Second of all, ask for feedback. Ask other people what you're doing well, or what are some of the ways that you let them down? And you're going to have to really have people be honest with you. You need to invite it and really demonstrate that you're sincere about wanting to do something about this. One of the best ways to get good, accurate feedback is to actually empower the other person to say, hey, I want to know what you have to say about this, and I'd like you to actually follow up with me in a week and ask me how I'm doing with that, and be ready to give me some more feedback about whether you've actually seen any change or not. That's a level of honesty with ourselves and with other people that is both inviting, and it's also very high accountability. But it will help you to develop more self-awareness and also a better relationship with the person that you include in your journey toward greater self-awareness. Use tools. Now, there's a number out there. I would just encourage you to, there's good emotional intelligence assessments that you can use and take part on. You can find them online. You can get them from people that you trust or that you know around you. I would also encourage you to take a look at things I was mentioning, like your behavior style. There's a good assessment called Talent Insights, which actually looks at both your behavior style and the driving forces that motivate you into action and things that you avoid as well. 360 feedback is really valuable if you're able to get people around you involved in that whole project. It takes a little more time and resources, but it's very valuable. And I've walked a number of managers through 360 feedback and debriefing them and coaching them on how to take that feedback and put it to the best use for their own improvement and growth as a person and as a manager, as a leader. There's a few other things that I would encourage you to do as well, besides keeping a journal, seeking feedback, using tools, and that would be what I call experiential learning. Learning that's not just mental or cognitive, but actually gets you involved in something hands-on. A few examples from my own life that I would share with you. I got involved in a martial art called Aikido a number of years ago, and there's something very powerful that I saw about when I'm in the dojo and when I'm being attacked by someone else, and how I respond emotionally to that threat or to that attack, and whether I can remain calm, how I deal with the situation, my physical tension. A lot of things are involved in that whole process of learning to deal with aggression. And so that's the type of experiential learning that I think you'd find useful. Another one, in my life, I always had a lifelong dream of learning to fly. So I actually took that up about 12 years ago. I went through ground school, passed it with flying colors. I learned all the cognitive and mental stuff about flying, no problem. But the actual skill part of learning to fly the airplane and make decisions and land it, that took me a lot more time than I'd care to admit. And my instructor had to pull me aside toward the end of my flight training and say, Ron, you're going to have to nail this. And this is something that you're just not good at, is learning to judge your distance to the runway and get down on the ground without bumping, without putting the plane or your passengers in jeopardy. I didn't want to hear that, but it was tough talk that I needed to hear. And that kind of experiential learning that was beyond the head, that was really involving all the senses, all my judgment, emotions, was very powerful for me. And I would encourage you to take part in experiential learning exercises. Some things that you could do is join a team or a project to get better at seeing how you interact with people, how you solve problems, and just as a way to increase your self-awareness. So there's a number of pointers. We're out of time for now, but I would just encourage you, keep working on self-awareness. It really pays off in the long term and in the short term as well, as you become more approachable and as people see you as someone who's really committed to growth and getting better at what you're trying to do in life. I hope these tips have been helpful. I invite you to subscribe to our channel and put your comments down below. Thanks for joining us today.